Well, if you then plunge someone's hand into ice, if they're negatively primed, they cannot cope with pain. If you actually take a group of subjects and you positively prime them and you stick their hands into that ice, they can withstand the pain, the acute pain, for longer, and they don't report it being so severe.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Finding Equilibrium show. I'm delighted to be here, delighted that you're here, and delighted that my guest today is a wonderful Kim Serafini. Did I say that right?
Almost. Serafini.
Serafini. Yeah, it's such a wonderful name, and it's so wonderful to see you. And how are you today? And where are you, first of all?
I'm very well, thank you, Lawrence. Hello, everybody. It's an honor, privilege, and pleasure to be here. I am actually in the Australian state of Queensland, in a regional, beautiful area called the Sunshine Coast. And there's an exquisite resort town called Noosa. And we're on a gorgeous estate in the hinterland, so surrounded by millions of trees and koalas, and with a gorgeous view of the Pacific Ocean.
Sounds idyllic, sounds wonderful. Now, Kim, and I didn't introduce you properly, but you're a best-selling author. You founded a tech company, which is kind of rare, being female, and I'd love to talk to you more about that. And of course, you're the CEO and the founder of Positive Prime, which is how we first connected. And so maybe for the audience's benefit and people who are not familiar with your work, I'd love you to take a few moments just to first introduce yourself, but also to tell us your story. How did you come to being a best-selling author? How did you come to founding a company? I'd love to find out.
Okay, so given that I'm not 10 years of age, there's several decades to pack into a couple of moments. The truth is, I was super lucky, born in Papua New Guinea. That's very rare and unique in and of itself, on the equator. So I really have paradise in my DNA. I also was a little white girl in a black man's country. And I say that deliberately because I have a different perspective about diversity than most people do, because I actually literally grew up a minority. I did, in fact, come to Australia because in those days, now I'm dating myself, boarding school in either Hawaii or Singapore or Sydney was really the option for expats. Luckily for me, my family actually moved to Brisbane. And so I was just at that time when private universities and Ivy League equivalents were beginning here in Australia, and I went to Bond. I studied commerce, so I went to business school, and I had this conditioning that really was probably from my entrepreneurial grandfather. He'd gone there as an Italian to Papua New Guinea and had founded many businesses, including large manufacturing operations for Schweppes and Pepsi, Cola, and so forth. Anyway, I was on the shop floor as a child. I was also observing a leader who communicated with people who didn't speak your language, which was very, very interesting. I'm sure it's been formative. Now, wow and wow and wow, what's the point of all of that? Well, it actually does mean that I've created a technology solution that we call positively primes the mind. There's a science and an art to that. It's born out of the field of positive psychology and neuroscience. And I actually dove into organizational psychology because after I graduated from business school, I went to London and I ended up on a project that had me working in New York, and I lived in Paris, for about 6 months. And I was one of those incredibly fortunate young women, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ambitious, dynamic, and ready to really take on the world. What happened, fascinatingly enough, as I was working in this field of mergers and acquisitions as a management consultant, I was working with a firm that was truly at the leading edge in London. And in fact, one of my mentors and bosses, one of the senior directors or consultants in my team is Octavius Black, who went on to found the Mind Gym in the United Kingdom.
Right.
I also worked with another amazing woman named Hilary Scarlett, and she's written a textbook just recently on the neuroscience of change. Well, the three of us have actually moved in similar circles around the globe doing relatively related things. And it's probably because of the work that we did as change management consultants 20 plus years ago in London and New York and so forth in these, giant mergers and acquisition projects. And I worked on things like the AstraZeneca merger, the PricewaterhouseCoopers merger, and I could go on and on and on. The critical point is that with some mates, some friends in London who were English, we went to Geneva one weekend to an Anthony Robbins Unleash the Power Within seminar, right?
Yeah.
And so whilst my very conservative, traditional, skeptical and cynical English colleagues thought that I'd joined a cult, I actually loved that experience. And I ended up going and doing all of the other in-depth retreat programs with Tony Robbins over the next year. Why is that important? Well, because he said something key. He intimated that we should make our vacation ideas our vocation if we really wanted to be fulfilled and satisfied and do something meaningful in the world that brings us joy and makes us all juicy. They're his words. So I literally quit the corporate world and I went back to study in the United Kingdom osteopathy and exercise physiology, and I became a sports therapist. I then led a very interesting life over the next couple of decades because I created a business in the spa industry serving health retreats and beauty salons and day spas. And I am actually the inventor of what is now commonly known as the treatment posto massage. And not very many people know that about me. And
that's so interesting.
It was because I was fascinated about thermotherapy and cryotherapy, like heat therapy and cold therapy. And this was 20 plus years ago. I ended up training thousands of therapists all over the world. I set up a distributorship in India, a distributorship in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, a distributorship in Asia. I could go on and on and on about the story. But I trained Ayurvedic doctors in the Himalayas, or the Himalayas as they call them. And on that particular course that I was running, I was learning more from all of these extraordinary people than I was ever teaching them. Isn't that always the way? And I was having, Ayurveda treatments and it's really where I got exposed to a genuine and sincere appreciation of meditation and mindfulness. And this is a very long time ago. What happened, true story, whilst I'm looking at these majestic mountains, is that I had one of those magnificent downloads that people talk about, an epiphany, an aha. And I realized that this tiny little insignificant human being that is Kim Serafini, whilst looking at this majestic, series of mountains, if only I could understand all is one and one is all, and if only I didn't take for granted all that I'd been gifted for in life, maybe I wouldn't be so traumatized in my mind and in my heart about not being enough. Now, a lot of us have done emotional intelligence courses, and we can go on and on and on. And we've done all sorts of personality profiling. And surely it's not new to the audience who's listening that we have a monkey in our mind most of the time, and it is a critic. It's not a cheerleader. And I was that classic person. And I think that, interestingly enough, business school teaches us this zero-sum thinking. It's like, let's look at all of the risks and let's mitigate the risks. And of course, those who are also listening know that there is a better, brighter way. It's strength-based approaches. The field of positive psychology has really enabled us to start to appreciate that if we just focus on our talents and our gifts and our strengths and we develop those and we encourage people and we make them aware of them, then they're going to contribute more to the planet, to life, to the business, to themselves, et cetera, right? To their communities. What Positive Prime does now is it is an exquisite experience. It's much more sophisticated than meets the eye because it's so simple, but it is an audio-visual exercise that you do. It's based inside a proprietary player. So our actual player does some pretty fancy things that, guess what, through some friends of ours, Lawrence, we're in the process of beginning our clinical research with EEGs and skin conductance and eye tracking and heart rate variability to prove some of the claims from our initial piece of efficacy research. So this is what we know. If you view one of our audio-visual exercises that we call a positive prime session, and if you do it for a minimum of 3 minutes, the effect will last up to 6 to 8 hours. So from a scientific point of view, that's a long-term effect. And so that's super exciting. What I'm about to say is actually phenomenal. But people look at this particular audiovisual activity and they don't know that every single photograph of 1,000 are carefully chosen, specifically selected for what they actually do to your biochemistry and to your physicality and the way that it heals, and indeed the way that it accelerates learning. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah.
I've collapsed about 20 plus years of learning from some of the greatest people and working with some of the greatest people in management consulting around these leading edge ideas, and also in the health and wellness industry. And I've collapsed them, and there's a synergistic combination that's going on with what is positive prime. We have tens of thousands of users. They're everyday people who want to feel better. And they're interested in things like vision boards and gratitude journals. And we've kind of combined a whole heap of different concepts, and we've created an all-in-one solution that is super scalable, affordable, accessible, and interesting. Quite frankly, really, really interesting. And you mentioned a little bit about being the founder of a software company as a woman. I have to tell you, if I'd have known how complex, complicated, difficult, frustrating this journey was going to be, I would never have signed up for it. So sometimes ignorance is bliss. And it's actually best that I didn't know what being a tech entrepreneur of a global company was actually going to entail, because I would have freaked myself out and thought, no, we're not going there.
Absolutely.
But I'm in the thick of it.
Kim, let me interrupt for 1 second. Thank you very much for sharing that. So it's a very interesting story. So from the kind of roots in Papua New Guinea to an entrepreneurial grandfather to then having a privileged life and traveling the world and that role in M&A and really M&A is not known for its kind of link to well-being. It's kind of hard graft. So you did that, and then you saw Tony Robbins, similar to me. I went to the same thing. It's funny how those events can really trigger a change. But then you left, and at the time that must have felt highly risky to have been able to kind of just step outside of all of that kind of security and then move into a completely different industry and then evolve into the kind of building the spa business and kind of where you are now. I guess one question that comes to mind, and thank you for sharing with us the detail. I'd love to learn more about Positive Prime and exactly what it is and how it works. But if you had access to that product when you were in your M&A days, when you were really what difference would it have made? I guess I'm curious to know whether you needed to go through that journey, all of those experiences to get to the aha moment. Whereas if you were handed the aha moment when you were in your 20s, would you have appreciated it? Would it have made the same level of impact? Did you need to do the work, the experience? Because it is a really interesting story how like each chapter almost led to the next chapter, and you're clearly an entrepreneurial, spirited person, inspired by your grandfather as you shared. So Tony Robbins would have really, I guess, fueled that passion. Charged you up in that direction, clearly armed with all that knowledge that you would have gained in business and all of those things. So yeah, I'm curious to know whether, because I think about this myself a lot, like as a parent, does your child need to do the work? Do they need to grow through experience, or can we can we save them the pain, or is the pain part of the growth? It's an interesting point of discussion. I'd love your views.
It's profound, that question, really, and I've wondered the same thing. I'll tell you, there's a little bit more to my story that has really made me ponder this a whole heap more deeply than most. So I sit here right now today with a cardiac pacemaker in my chest, even though I spent decades in the health and wellness industry. And part of it is ironic, and the other part is confronting, because I've only just recently had an appointment with a really amazing neurologist here in Australia, who suggested that it's likely I was born with this autonomic nervous system dysfunction. And if you go Google that, you'll scare yourself, or I certainly did, because the other two things in that category are MS and MND, motor neurons disease, as we call it here in Australia, or ALS, as most people in the United States or North America call it. And yet I'm functioning, I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm in a really gratifying and enriching romantic relationship with my spouse. We have like the best fun. I've been very conscious about that part of my life. And so why did I just go through a couple of years where I had 6 near-death experiences, because I had 6 unconscious episodes, because I had 6 what they technically would call a cardiac arrest, because my heart completely flatlined, like it stopped, it paused, and then it got started again. The specialists actually put a special device inside my chest, and they were observing that my heart would just stop. And after about 10 seconds, you're clinically dead. And after about 20 seconds, things start to go very, very wrong inside your body, because you don't have perfusion. So you don't have oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood going around your body. And I know so much about healing and repairing and self-love and these rituals to take care of ourselves. I can probably look you in the eye, hand on heart, and say, I would not be alive had I not spent 20 years in the spa industry, and were I not so devoted to helping lots of other people not to experience overwhelm and breakdowns, and allow them the opportunity for breakthroughs. So I personally think I needed to go on the journey in order to be the creator of positive prime. And even when I had like this cardiac MRI, and they said functionally there's nothing wrong with her heart, technically, mechanically, structurally, electrically, there's nothing wrong with my heart. What's going on? What's going on? They just really didn't know. But what they found more fascinating was that I didn't have permanent irreversible kidney damage. I didn't have permanent irreversible, and I could go on and on and on, brain damage, etc., from the amount of time that my heart would stop, which would be over 20 seconds, and they could observe this. And because I'm so young, they were very cautious about advising me that it was not negotiable for me to have a cardiac pacemaker implanted. Now, what does that really mean? I don't think I could have the compassion for the people that we serve without being who I am, right?
Yeah.
And yet, the whole reason why I now look back and I think, wow, they were moments of burnout that had me seeking the answers in the spirituality that's wrapped up into the spa industry. And so you mentioned I was a best-selling author, and indeed I am. I would be doing massages, and people with these beautiful handcrafted marble sculptures that were white and black, white marble, very rare white marble, very rare black marble. And exactly at 53 degrees does the black one act like an ultrasound machine. I could go on and on and on about this treatment. But I'd be doing this, and the clients that were lying on the table, and you were protecting their modesty, but they were vulnerable. And so in the corporate world, we talk a lot about vulnerability. And it's really interesting because the people who feel very uncomfortable having a massage, that's actually probably the biggest clue to what's happening for them emotionally, mentally, right? The ability to actually be touched not in an essential way, but in a therapeutic way, and allowing, like literally surrendering to the healing, it says so much about people. So I'm massaging them, and I really am exceptional with my hands. I've got a gift, and I heal people, and I know it, and they do too. And they came and they lay on the table for a couple of reasons. There was something seriously wrong with their relationships. It was either fighting with their boss, or fighting with a colleague, or fighting with a friend, or fighting with a spouse, or fighting with their children, right? There was aggression, there was anger, there was betrayal, there was all of these things that are almost too hard for us to discuss. And if it wasn't in their relationships, it was in their finances. They were spending too much, not saving enough. They had credit card debt they couldn't jump over. They couldn't pay their school fees. They didn't know how to pay their mortgage. They were literally having a meltdown financially, and it was physiologically impacting them. And so they would come to lie on a massage table because they needed a moment of relief, just letting go, right? Just escape. It's a healthy way to escape, a whole heap better than drinking a bottle of Bacardi. Funnily enough, I actually worked on the merger of Grand Metropolitan and Guinness that became Diageo, and so I worked on the merger and the integration for IDV and UV. I was one of those chicks who was going to drink a bottle of Smirnoff or a bottle of, and I had like 100 different brands to choose from. Anyway, and I worked in, the head office in London. I needed to save myself. And so what happens is I recognize in these clients or patients that I'm dealing with, and I think, oh, okay, so this is long before the gratitude thing became a movement. I wrote a book on being grateful.
Right.
And I had this awareness that which we take for granted gets taken from us. And it's a rather uncomfortable universal truth. And so I wrote a book about being really grateful for life, noticing the sun, noticing the wind, noticing the perfection of a flower. And I then started to really mix that in with noticing the perfection within all of us. And indeed, there being nothing else that's perfect, including us, right? So all this imperfection and this continuum. So what I then did was translate that even into Positive Prime today. The piece of software, when you watch these particular audiovisual exercises, you upload photographs of your own to personalize the experience, because we need to have our identity integrated into content in order for us to go through change. We need to believe it's us. So if you've never made $1 million and you're watching a piece of content on I Am a Millionaire, unless you see photographs of yourself and your family and your pets and the highlights from your holidays inside that content, you actually energetically, mentally, you can't accept that I am a millionaire, right? In the esoteric world, where we talk about affirmations and afformations, and Anthony Robbins calls them incantations, a lot of the reasons why some of these things don't work for people and they get even more jaded is because there are a couple of tiny little secrets, and one of them is you have to integrate yourself. That's where identity change comes from, right? And so in terms of the software that I was building, when I talk to the engineers and the programmers and the developers, and I say it's absolutely essential that this activity allows people to upload their own photographs, they're like shaking their heads. And I say, no, this is not theoretical. This is hardcore practical and relevant. We need for people to actually see themselves in the content if we actually want them to change. What's the point if we're not moving the needle? Or what's the point if we're not transforming, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Lawrence, do I believe that we need to go through pain in order to learn our lessons? I believe that the answer is no. However, we believe into our paradigms or our anchored beliefs, our conditioning. And so if you think life is hard and it should be hard, and maybe you've had that Protestant upbringing, you will actually search the world for evidence to support that belief, and you will actually be the co-creator of the circumstances, the situation, and the people in your life that actually proves that's right to you. Because as a human being, from a neuroscience point of view, you have this insatiable appetite to be right. It's so important to all of us as human beings. So whatever we truly believe, we will actually substantiate to ourselves. So you know what, Lawrence, if you and I, right this very minute, were actually diagnosed with something dire, and we believed that we could 100% cure ourselves, we could. The problem is that most people go and find a whole heap of different reasons as to why may not. You know, and the minute that you introduce doubt, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, you really underline something. It's the power of the mind, isn't it? Like the mindset and why it works and why placebo works. Like no one knows when they study placebo. It's like, oh, it just didn't work. So we put it down to an exception or something like that. But there are I mean, I've been reading about this myself, you know, so many cases of I guess what you'd call miracles, you know, people who are diagnosed and it's like suddenly they're better and no one can understand it. And it's like, why is that? And it comes down, what the studies that they've done have shown that it is that power of the mind, the belief that, and no doubt at all. And I guess many of us, because we've been brought up in a world where our minds have been conditioned to believe one thing, and it takes a while, I guess, to suddenly start to unlearn some of those, some of the things that we've learned that have really held us back. You know, I relate to that in my own life. You kind of, you know, you go through education and you learn things, and it's all normal. It's all normal until you suddenly, a paradigm shift occurs and you look at things and you think, well, actually, it's not normal. You know, it's not normal to wake up feeling tired and exhausted and to drag yourself through your day, because everybody feels like that. Then we think, oh, it must be normal, but of course it's not normal. There is a better way that we can live in, as I would say, in equilibrium and in that state, feel good and have the energy to make a difference. You know, that's what ultimately I believe we all would like to do, is make some difference, feel that our time on this planet is having some kind of impact, and in many ways we're that thing getting in the way of that of that vision in terms of doing that. So any tools that can help us change the way we look at the world, change our mindset, and I feel we spend a lot of time looking for tools, looking for the, and you mentioned a lot of them, you know, affirmations and all of these tools, gratitude journals and things like that. But sometimes they just don't work. So we try and we keep searching and searching, but this self-doubt, let's call it, this kind of fear keeps coming back into our world. And I'd love to dive a little bit deeper now into positive prime, because I had the benefit of experiencing it myself, like through our wonderful mutual friend Anna Raj Gambhir, who actually brought us together. So he did an experiment the other day on me where I actually, you know, I was positive primed and he was tracking. I had this you know, device on my head, so literally tracking my brainwave. It was very interesting to experience the process. But I'd love you to share a little bit more about how it works, like, and what do we need to do, and is it sustainable for us? You know, should we all be focused on, because it's like you've brought a new language into lexicon, you know, positive primed mind, you know, a positive prime mind is a healthy mind, and like, where are we? Do we have a positive prime mind, or do we have a mind which is exposed to all of the flawed thinking that is designed to make us feel not good and to impact our well-being? So how does positive prime work right now? You told us a little bit about it before, and I'd love you to kind of share. So, and maybe the way to do this is to take the stance of somewhat, and a lot of people right now are struggling, you know. So you talked about the book that you wrote, which I love, you know, your whole insights on the massage table. I thought that was very interesting. But you talked about recognizing that a lot of things that we take for granted are taken away. And I think we've all learned that over the last 18 months. You know, it's a very day-to-day thing. There's certain freedoms that we've all enjoyed are suddenly taken away, and then it's like, oh, they've gone. so we kind of relate to that, and a lot of people are really struggling, like really impacted. You know, there's been a huge amount of media coverage that has created a lot of fear in people's minds, fear of sickness, fear of, fear of loss. And people are struggling physically, you know, and turn into some of the unsustainable habits that you mentioned before. And so within that context, someone who's feeling like that, how can Positive Prime help them?
Okay, so here's the good news, Lawrence. I'm going to try and compress a whole half-day workshop into 5 minutes. I must mention, you talked about the placebo effect. One of the greatest TED Talks that influenced me is by a woman. Her name is Dr. Alia Crum, and it's on placebos. Her name, Alia Crum, C-R-U-M. She's at Stanford, and she was a student of Sean Achor's. So for some people who are listening, you might know Sean Achor, S-H-A-W-N, Achor, A-C-H-O-R. He wrote The Happiness Advantage. He has a very, very famous TED Talk. And he chose Positive Prime as the intervention within his The Science of Happiness course that he co-created with the Oprah Winfrey Network. And they sold tens of thousands of access codes to this course for corporates in America. So that was really what gave us our advantage. What's fascinating is that the Oprah Winfrey Network required the efficacy testing on Positive Prime to prove our claims, right? And so that is actually how the research was done. I'll give you an example. I could show you a Positive Prime session. The reason why I need to show you is because it's an audio visual, it's a visual experience. Why? Because we think in pictures. So I can say to you, hey, you know what, for anyone who's listening, whatever you do, do not think of a beautiful, glossy helium balloon that's floating in your room, that's a lovely, vibrant silver and pink, and you've all got an elephant balloon floating above you, right? We think in pictures. And so interventions like this must be visual. They cannot be just audio. You can't listen to a guided audio meditation and have the same impact on human beings, right? So you view a Positive Prime session. There are 1,000 images. I'll give you an example. There are types of photographs, and there are a certain number of types of photographs that you see. Images that are carefully selected, they're curated for the effect we're looking for. So I can show you a Duchenne smile, right? So a really beautiful, genuine, I really like you, I care about you smile, right? The mirror neurons in your brain that are activated by the retina in your eyes, it goes through this process, it sends messages to your endocrine system, and hormonally you produce more serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, other endorphins and neurotransmitters, right? But here's the crazy thing. I need to show you a certain number of photographs of these Duchenne smiles in order for you to have the reaction. And when I do that, a couple of things start to happen. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory comes into play. You actually literally get new neural networks firing. You get activity in parts of your brain that are responsible for better quality decision-making, faster and more accurate. You get more solutions-oriented thinking. You get the ability to solve puzzles faster. You get more creativity. And so we created something that anybody can do, and within 3 minutes, it produces the effect every time for every human being on the planet. Now, we also put lots of images in there that address unconscious biases, gender biases, religious biases, cultural biases, etc. We also put in lots of photographs of green tree canopy. See, long before there was COVID and everybody had heard about cytokine storms, cytokines are this protein that's involved in your immune functioning. If I show you a photograph of green tree canopy, your body processes that image and it actually literally gives you a boost to your immune system, right? So once we put you in a state of being that is positively primed, you can learn more quickly. You can then retain it for longer. You can recall it faster. And all of this has been tested, right? So I didn't invent all of these studies that are done. And interestingly enough, through colleagues like Professor Kim Cameron at the University of Michigan, or and he's very famous for positive organizational work. Or other colleagues of mine like Jack Canfield, the very famous guy who wrote The Success Principles or Chicken Soup for the Soul, and he's sold $1 billion worth of books, and Sean Acor. What I can tell you is that when they test positive and negative priming, let's just say we created a, I don't want to call it a slideshow, but it's effectively a slideshow. And all of the images were of disease, disaster, floods, fires, fighting. We could negatively prime you really super quickly, and we would see physiological changes in your body. We would actually see cortisol levels. We, put sticks in people's mouths and we test their saliva. We've done this with positive prime, right? Just like Anuraj, the gorgeous man that he is, really super fancy, tech expert. He puts this, amazing revolutionary device on your head and you can see brainwaves. Yeah. Well, if you then plunge someone's hand into ice, if they're negatively primed, they cannot cope with pain. If you actually take a group of subjects and you positively prime them and you stick their hands into that ice, they can withstand the pain, the acute pain, for longer, and they don't report it being so severe. So let's extrapolate that out. One of the interesting things that happened was that they positively primed and negatively primed a group of doctors through Kaiser Permanente, one of these organizations in the States. And then they gave them case studies. And the negatively primed doctors, it's alarming. Let me tell you, the positive primed doctors came to accurate diagnoses faster.
So interesting. So and it makes sense. It completely makes sense. And I guess what I realize, and we're almost out of time because I feel I could talk to you for at least another hour or two. But what I realized when I listened to you is that you've created and really focused on how we can positively prime ourselves. So you've really taken all of that amazing research that exists in fields like positive psychology. I studied psychology myself, and it was all about negative. All you study is anger, fear, like all negative emotions. I did my dissertation, this was again way back when, but I did it on humor, and this was before positive science, and it was tough because and I wanted to understand a positive emotion, and I learned a lot at that time. I did my own primary research, and it was really interesting. And then, of course, we are where we are now, so we know that positively primed people are going to have all of these additional benefits. Their immunity is going to be stronger. We know all the things that you said through science, and yet we're in a world where I feel that all of our media are negatively priming everybody. So if we actually consume, so you're almost fighting against that. And as individuals, we have to take control of our minds so that we do positively prime our minds like a habit every day. But that means we have to block out everything. Like you turn on the television and it's all negative, more negative, and you feel bad and you feel worried and you feel fearful. Before we end, and do tell us how we can get positive prime, because I think there's a huge need for it, and having experienced it myself, it is amazing. Like Anuraj tracked my brain waves, had a significant difference in relaxation, as you knew they would, because suddenly you're seeing these things, and if you see it and see it and see it, eventually you believe it. This is how advertisings work for for decades. That's why we believe that things that are things about certain products that may not necessarily be true, but we are kind of seeing those things. So it's a very interesting topic around that. But last question: what do we do as individuals in an environment that is full of negatively primed content? How do we cope with that? And maybe the question is more of a personal question, really, given this is all about finding equilibrium. Like, what do you do to make sure that your own mind is positively primed every day, so that you don't go, down this, path of fear?
We definitely need another hour. So do you know they've actually scientifically proven 15 minutes of the news will physically make you sick?
Really?
right?
It doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
So don't watch the news. Don't listen to the news. I'm being really super honest. The minute I read that research, it was actually conducted with Martin Seligman at UPenn with Michelle Geelan, who coincidentally is Sean Acor's wife, which is why I know about it, right? I'm serious. I literally decided consciously I would not consume the news ever again, right? It is so difficult for me to be healthy that I can't possibly expose myself to that. And I don't, and I won't, right? I just don't, and I can't, and I won't. Now, people go, oh, but how do you stay like aware of the world? Well, because of the algorithms actually in some social media, you can only choose to read good stories, or if you are very aware, you can actually go, oh, wow, this is a story with a lot of toxicity in it. And you just literally be disciplined and you stop reading or you stop viewing. I have this tool called Positive Prime, and so do thousands and thousands and thousands of others. Here is the fantastic news. Do you know positive outweighs and overpowers negative? So this is super critical. If you can watch Positive Prime sessions for a minimum of 3 minutes a day, we have variable speed for a whole different reasons. I need another hour. It's actually about bypassing your other than consciousness and getting over the conscious critical judgment factors of your prefrontal cortex at slower speeds, but that's a whole nother thing. And our proprietary player literally reshuffles every single one of the flashcards every single time you view it, because the brain needs novelty. It's a whole neuroscience concept, but we need to show you all of the images in a different order every single time you watch it for a whole heap of other reasons about creativity. But the reality is that it lasts 6 to 8 hours. So if you then consume the toxic news or some bullying on social media, you will not be impacted as heavily or as fiercely, right? So it is almost like your protection. And I don't say that lightly. And so throughout the pandemic, in terms of having tenacity and resilience, and we could go on and on and on about this, I advise others, I certainly do it myself. I watch several Positive Prime sessions per day. I watch 3 minutes first thing in the morning. Before anything else, I get my laptop. I'm like, bleary-eyed. I open it up. I expose myself. I just watch it. I just let it flow. And then I'll do it just before I start like a meeting or a presentation. I'll do it in the afternoon. I'll do it like before, so I can switch activities. By the way, there's lots of content. There's stuff about relationships. There's stuff about your health and well-being. There's stuff about finances. There's stuff about healing trauma. We've got psychologists and counselors and social workers, and we've got amazing content contributors. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Some world-class, some very famous, right? So you must give yourself the opportunity. You are worthy and deserving of it. Your life is that precious. Right? Just positively prime yourself. And then the rest of it is like it hits you and it bounces off you. You're like Teflon, right? So
wonderful. Yeah, wonderful.
That's the best advice I can give. And I know it sounds like I've drunk the Kool-Aid and I'm just talking about my own product. It's not just that I believe in it. I know it scientifically, and we're about to start proving that with a fancy institution here in Australia and the Neuroscience Lab and everything else like that.
So amazing, so amazing. We definitely must come back for part 2. And and your product is the result of your life experience, because I feel this myself, and I think a lot of people who are in the health and wellness space, because we struggled, we've done these big jobs and we think there's something missing, we eventually have to create solutions for ourselves to help protect us from the the madness and the everything that's coming at us, because this environment has really happened relatively quickly. If you think about it, in the evolution of humanity, we've never before been exposed to global news, so we know exactly what's happening. So something that happens in Germany on the other side of the world could affect us here in Australia in the moment. Absolutely. It happens, unless we protect ourselves. So I love this. And I guess from an equilibrium point of view, finding equilibrium is something we all need to do every day. And every day things come along that push us out of equilibrium. But what you're saying is the Positive Prime approach is a key tool in our daily toolkit, because if we integrate that as a habit, then of course it protects us so that we're still affected by what we're exposed to, but we're not affected to the same extent. I absolutely love that. You know, it's it's wonderful. Where can people find more about you and about your book and about Positive Prime? Because I feel we all need this.
Yeah, and you know what the funny thing is we're a little bit like Netflix, right? So we have a 5-for-1 family offer, which could be for your teammates, or it could be for your colleagues, or it could be for your family and friends, right? So you sign up, you get 10 days free trial. You go straight to positiveprime.com. It's really not complicated. You enter in your credit card details and you have access. And if you don't like it, you send us an email and say, or support ticket, you know, hey, this is not for me. I don't want to pay my $200 a year or my, you know, $19 a month. We have tens of thousands of Americans, or North Americans, Canadians, and people in the United States who actually already use Positive Prime. We have a much bigger following in Europe than we do in Australia and New Zealand. It was actually easier, given my colleagues that I've been working with, for me to launch this in the US. So go to positiveprime.com, sign up. And here's the beautiful thing when you really think about it. 5-for-1 at $20 a month. I'll give you an example. I'm about to go to a chiropractor today just for a little adjustment. I've learned to do that because of what's going on in my body, even though I'm an osteopath, right? I can't fix myself. I go to a chiropractor. I do lots of other things as well with, you know, even though I am into being qualified as an exercise physiologist, I still have a fitness trainer. I pay $60 for 15 minutes for a chiropractic adjustment. This is kind of like that for your mind and your emotions. And it's $20 a month, and you share it with 5 other people. Are you kidding? I did that deliberately because I don't want cost to be the excuse that people don't do this. And if they don't do it every day, like they don't go to the gym or whatever, but they do it just once a week or once a month, it's still better than nothing, right?
It's something we can do. The effort is kind of what I would say low effort, high impact, but it's better to do it once a week, but it's better and gradually build up. It's something you have to do continuously, like every kind of habit or routine. Exactly. Brushing your teeth, you know, if you do it once a year, you know, your teeth are going to not look so great and probably won't actually be in your mouth for very long. But another topic. Kim, thank you so much for spending time with us. Honestly, it was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I have to acknowledge you for, you know, the amazing journey that you've been on, and for bringing Positive Prime, you know, to the world, and for everything that you do. It really is appreciated by us all. So thank you, Kim, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And give yourselves all a little bit of a hug and say, thank you for surviving this day. Sometimes we just need to give ourselves a hug too.
Absolutely. All right.
Hug to you. All right. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time. Take care now.